Welcome to Out of Bounds Read, the official podcast of the Common Weakness Enumeration program. In this podcast, we'll talk with CWE program partners and members of the broader cybersecurity community about common weaknesses in software and hardware, the vulnerabilities they cause, how to reduce them, and how using CWE can help make products more secure by design. Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Out of Bounds Read podcast. My name is Alec Summers. I'm the day-to-day manager and task lead of the CWE program. We have a special guest today. His name is Przemyslaw Roguski from Red Hat. Rogue, over to you.
Thank you, Alec. Hello, everyone. My name is Przemyslaw Roguski. I live in Poland. I'm a principal security engineer at Red Hat. And as you have already heard, everyone calls me Rogue.
Wonderful. It's great to have you. We also have two members of the technical staff from the CWE team joining us. I'd like to introduce first Steve Christey-Coley. Over to you.
Glad to be here. I have been the CWE technical lead since its inception, 2005, 2006, along with Bob Martin, and I was also CVE co-founder back in 1999. You could say that career-wise, I've tried to be all vulnerabilities all the time, and I'm very glad to be participating on this, talking about an important aspect of CWE.
Thank you, Steve. And we also have Connor Mullaly. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Alec. Hi, I'm Connor. I'm a member of the CWE technical staff. I've been on the team for around 3 years now, specifically focused on the top 25 effort, so I'm glad to be here.
Okay, thanks, Connor. So, Rogue, can you give from your perspective what CWE is and the problem that it solves from your point of view?
This is a very good question, and this is sometimes a problematic for everyone to understand the big difference between weakness and vulnerability. And people many times mix all of both those terms together. Weakness in our understanding, Red Hat understanding, is that is a condition of in a software, firmware, hardware, or a service component that under certain circumstances could lead to vulnerability, right? That's the official weakness definition. And the CWE program groups all of those weaknesses together and categorize them in a clear and straightforward way. So the CWE program is very useful and can help significantly with the identification of the root cause of the vulnerability and can give a better understanding of the vulnerability itself. It also helps with the shift left security approach, where we address security issues proactively before the product or software is shipped to the end user.
Excellent.
One thing that I'd like to note about why CWE exists in the first place is because many different programmers make exactly the same kinds of mistakes, or they make exactly the same kinds of insecure design choices that then lead to vulnerabilities.
Excellent. Great point. So recently, there was a blog published by Red Hat called Red Hat's CWE Journey. Rogue, what prompted you to write that?
First of all, let's clarify that the Red Hat CWE Journey blog post wasn't written only by me. It was teamwork. The main reason why we decided to write this blog was limited knowledge and lack of understanding, even in the security industry, of how the CWE program can be used by various teams in the security domain. Many times I have heard, yes, I know CWE, but it's just an academic activity. It's not very useful. At the same time, the same people were claiming that they perform various testing or scans and that they address all issues listed, for example, in the OWASP Top 10, which is based on the CWE program, right? So we decided to change this and explain how CWE can be used in our daily work.
So, how has Red Hat's experience and relationship with CWE changed over time? Can you talk a little bit about how it began and how it's developed to today?
Yes, of course. So at Red Hat, we started adding CWE data to our vulnerability records in 2012. Almost immediately, we started analyzing the collected CWE data, and we publish the results in our yearly risk report based on the data we collected throughout 2013. Over the next years, we extended our CWE data coverage, and also we added the CWE chains to our CWE data. We continue exploring new areas where collected CWE data can be used to improve the security of our products and software.
So, what has changed regarding how Red Hat uses CWE today?
In 2022, Red Hat changed significantly the way CWE weaknesses are assigned to vulnerabilities. We decided to adopt CWE 699 software development view and categories that are there as a CWE grouping, which helps our vulnerability analysts select much more accurate weaknesses to reported vulnerabilities. While we changed our default view to the software development view, like I mentioned, we continue to use all weaknesses from the entire CW program. So we just prioritize the accuracy of the data we produce. So that was the biggest recent change in the way how Red Hat handle CWE data on our side.
That's a great point there, and I think this might be a great possibility for further educating our listening audience about what a CWE view is. Steve, would you like to explain that for the listening audience?
Sure. One of the challenges that we have faced within CWE, more or less since the beginning, is that even after getting people to understand what weaknesses are and how they are different than vulnerabilities and attacks, CWE has hundreds of weaknesses that it catalogs. Some of them are more general, some of them are more accurate or more precise, as Rogue has just mentioned. But because there are so many weaknesses that we catalog within CWE, it becomes a usability problem for people who are coming into CWE and starting to try and understand it because there's so much data. So we have this notion of views, which are different ways of looking at the CWE data, frequently to just look at a subset of weaknesses that are all related and geared towards and organized towards particular kinds of users. So this view 699 that Rogue has been alluding to, we intentionally designed to be a fairly flat hierarchical structure with only a subset of CWEs that are covered at particular levels of abstraction, intended to be useful for developers. We also have other kinds of views, such as the research view, which really tries and provide a theoretical underpinning and in a theoretical classification of all weaknesses in increasingly abstract ways. We have customized views such as those for hardware, which is a selection of CWEs that specifically apply to hardware or apply to any kind of automated code, which is very useful for the hardware community. So the way that we have these views and the way we develop them is to try and anticipate particular kinds of users to CWE and then present them with the appropriate subsets of CWE weaknesses that are going to be most relevant to them.
Thanks, Steve. And can you say one more thing just about those views? How do people go and find these different kinds of views for the types of CWE information they may want to explore as they get started?
So on the CWE website, we list views in a couple different pages, but it's probably easiest to go to and look at the most recent version underneath the CWE list menu option. But we do present many different views that people can go and look through and just through clicking on the CWE website. And we'll be sure to add a link to those views in the notes that are associated with this podcast.
Thanks, Steve. And of course, always a simple Google search for CWE context around a certain types of technology or domain is always a decent way to try it as well. Rogue, can views be used to educate new CWE users or existing CWE users?
Definitely, like it was already mentioned, CWE views help us work with the CWE weaknesses by grouping them into well-defined categories. For example, like it was already mentioned, we use software development view, but there are other views like hardware design view. Views helps a lot also by reducing the scope to the most important weaknesses. So user doesn't need to be very familiar with all weaknesses in the CWE program, can just focus and use some subset that is the most important for the specific technology domain or use case. For example, you can see that was done in the weaknesses in the OWASP top 10, right? Or for example, that what we recently published as a CWE community, the CWE top 25 most dangerous software weaknesses.
Well, yeah, those are all great to explore. You mentioned the CWE Top 25 Most Dangerous Software Weaknesses list. Connor is our team lead for that. Connor, can you tell the audience what that Top 25 list is?
Sure. So our top 25 list helps to show the most dangerous and frequent software weaknesses that happen in relation to CVE records. So part of that process is we go through and look at CVE records that occurred in the previous 2 years and do our own mappings to CWE to see what types of weaknesses are happening frequently and how severe are those weaknesses. And then a combination of those two aspects helps us rate how dangerous we believe those weaknesses to be in our list from 1 to 25. And that's an effort to help the community be aware of these top 25 weaknesses to really highlight and keep in mind.
Rogue, in your opinion, is there an opportunity for further CWE views? Do you have any specific examples or thoughts around further things that we could offer as a program in that regard?
Well, this is a very good question, and definitely there is a space for opportunities how we can improve CWE program usage. Personally, I'm not sure if more views are required, but definitely we need to try to use views as a vehicle to educate people how CWE program can be used in a daily work, like I already mentioned. So yeah, definitely there is opportunity to improvements.
I would just add to that many of these views we created based on what appeared to be what our user community needed or wanted. However, we don't have a lot of direct engagement with many parts of the CWE community. We're very thankful for Rogue's participation in many different sub-efforts we have. And we also have the user experience working group who we engage with. But we are definitely open to hearing from people throughout the community about these views as to whether these views are suiting their needs or if they need some other alternatives. we're definitely open to hearing from anybody in the community.
Thanks, Steve. And Rogue, you mentioned at Red Hat a lot of the work that you're doing is in relating or finding a root cause weakness or set of weaknesses that apply to a particular vulnerability disclosure. Can you talk a little bit about why mapping to CWEs is important, and what's the benefit for the wider community in doing that?
That's a very good question, Alec. Because this aspect is often ignored, usually due to the pressure of time. Let's make it clear. When the vulnerability is disclosed, usually the owner or maintainer of the vulnerable code or component that is affected wants to fix the problem immediately and close the case. That's a typical workflow. But doing a deep root cause analysis to get a good understanding of the main reason why the vulnerability occurred could help to avoid the same type of issues in the future. Sounds like something straightforward, right? And getting the very good understanding of the root weakness is a key element here. Without this, there is a high chance that we will fix the same issue a few times in the same component. For example, let's take a look at the log4j vulnerability, the remote code execution that was reported by the end of 2021. It was fixed a few times in a row before it was finally resolved. That's why knowing the real root cause weakness that cause or group of weaknesses by selecting a weakness chain for the particular vulnerability helps significantly to fix the problem that is reported and also avoid the same issues in the future.
Couldn't agree more. Very well said.
So Rogue talked a bit about challenges with respect to finding and using the most precise, the most accurate CWE. In other words, mapping to the best root cause weakness available. This is a general problem that we've faced throughout the community, as well as on our own as we've been doing additional analysis work for producing the top 25. And so this is something that we want to really engage with the entire CWE community about, to really figure out what are the best ways to educate community members and to get the community as a whole to move forward to improve the quality of their CWE mappings. Because at that time, when we have our best CWE mappings available, we will then be able to best decide how to prevent those weaknesses, or at the very least detect them as early as possible, furthering our goal of really shifting left and avoiding the introduction of vulnerabilities into operational code in the first place. And to that effect, we've had a small working group that is starting up, built of some members of the CWE community, that will be looking at that mapping accuracy problem much more closely and proposing some solutions.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, and if members of our community are interested in joining that root cause mapping working group, please do reach out to us at cwe@miter.org. So CWE can be used to identify root cause weaknesses related to vulnerabilities, which is definitely valuable for the wider community. But thinking earlier in the product development lifecycle, how can CWE be useful as software is being developed? I know that recently, Red Hat also recently published a blog called Weakness Risk Patterns, a Red Hat way to identify poor software practices in the secure development lifecycle. Can you talk a little bit about CWE from that perspective?
Yes, of course. This is another very interesting topic, and we could spend really a long time on discussing this. But let me just give you a brief overview. So, as we already have already discussed, the CWE program can be used in many areas of the security industry. At Red Hat, we use CWE as a part of our software development lifecycle, SDL, to better visualize common weaknesses and better classify risk pattern in Red Hat products and components. This allows us to shift the approach from reactive to more proactive. I encourage everyone to take a look at that another blog post related to weaknesses, risk patterns in our SDL, because there are lots of useful examples.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that would be well worth people's time as well. So this has been really wonderful, Rogue, to hear more about yours and Red Hat's experience with CWE. In terms of challenges remaining, what is the most important, or perhaps a set of important challenges that CWE as a program must tackle going forward, in your opinion?
Well, on Red Hat side, even though we have used CWE for years, there are still areas that could be improved. On our side, we are still trying to improve our CWE assignment to vulnerabilities to make sure that our CWE choice explains the vulnerability in the best possible way. Always there is a way to make it better, right? Also, at the same time, we would like to better communicate the repeated weaknesses to our engineering team to fix potential issues before they lead to vulnerability. So let's make it clear. Security is not one-time event. As the IT security landscape continues to evolve, so do the practices that IT organization or Red Hat use to mitigate threats. So that's why we are exploring or new possible ways, for example, by using CWE data that we already collected over the years to improve our products and software.
It's always wonderful to hear from our community members and stakeholders in the program. Rogue, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great to have you and to hear more about Red Hat's experience. I do encourage those that are listening to explore their blogs that were recently published, Red Hat's CWE Journey and Weakness Risk Patterns, a Red Hat way to identify poor software practices in the secure development lifecycle. Rogue, thanks so much for joining us. It's been great to have you.
Thank you very much, Alec, for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
This has been another edition of the Out of Bounds Read podcast. Thanks for joining us. For more information, go to cwe.miter.org. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Out of Bounds Read podcast. If you like what you heard, please let us know. Visit us on our website at cwe.miter.org to learn more about the program and how to get involved, submit content ideas for review, or find out where to follow us on social media. We'll see you next time.